Yo, this is Josh Paulson, and this is totally not the same shirt that I wore in the last two videos. But anyway, I want to talk this time about something that is very near and dear to my heart, which is MA Overengineering. Oops, you just saw my YouTube video concepts. I failed life. I didn't fail life, just kidding, that's a joke. That's supposed to be funny. But you know what is actually funny is discussions about overengineering things. I had a quote here that I made, but I can quote myself. And I'm going to pull it over here so you can't look at it while I'm saying it. Only maybe I should, because that would be cool. It would appear that some people who say premature optimization is the root of all evil have no idea what optimization is, because they live more like engineering is the root of all evil, because no cohesive plan for the future has truly been built. Josh Paulson. I want to talk about the concept of, am I over-engineering my project? And I'm going to show you some of my code in it's JavaScript because I saw that there are a lot of people coming from web dev who were interested in this channel before. So that's why I'm here in JavaScript land. These concepts should apply to other languages as well, but I just want to talk about some of this here. So the problem that I've seen come up is that at times, when it comes to concerns about over-engineering, what actually is happening is that things are being built that cause pain down the road. And there is an aspect of trying to hit deadlines and rushing and, hey, we're in crunch mode and this just has to work. Even then, you can make your life less painful. Even then, you can end up handling your timelines in a different way. And what I've seen happen is that approaches that are ineffective in crunch time too get used in crunch time because it seemed like a way to solve the problem in that moment, or because there's just questions around how do we actually solve this problem, there's not really clarity. And so the idea of over-engineering something, the first thing that you really have to look at if you're asking, am I over-engineering this, is what are the problems that I'm actually trying to solve? There's a method that I think I talked about in another video that I really like called pies. And for some people, this is going to sound a little bit backwards how I have this set up, but it is problem, importance, effectiveness, and solving or solution. I don't know. It's kind of weird. It doesn't work. It works well enough for my purposes. So when it comes to am I over engineering, the first thing you have to know is, what is the problem? What is the problem I'm trying to solve? And one of the things that I love to add on to this, because we can really lose this as programmers, is this actually a problem? Because sometimes we get so excited about something cool that we solve problems that don't exist, or that aren't real problems, or that are really sidesteppable. So an example that I would say is that in this project button, the problem that I was trying to solve was having different audio logic for all these different types of button graphics. And this is for my game Josh Paulson's Button Mildly Remastered Edition, which is coming out on Steam. And some of you are going to skip this part, but some of you are true fans or something. I don't know. I don't know if I could say I have fans. I have some fans. I have one back there that's cool. That sounds creepy. It's actually a physical fan, like not a human being. Anyway, this is the game. I'll link to it down below. But I've made it so that there's just so much stupid stuff that you're doing in the game. And so things that were really simple are over-engineered if my goal was to keep things simple. This button audio controller contains logic for different ways to press and release the button. So we've got these files here that are on pressed play sound, passes in arguments, on release play sound. And so this is all logic for just pressing and releasing the button. So I go here. And, oh yeah, that's right. I disabled it for another video. Ha, 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 ha. That's actually kind of funny. It's a little bit funny. It's also a little bit sad because it's just confusing. So the thing is that when it comes to this, there we go. And it looks like I have an error somewhere. Let's ignore that. We've got these sounds and it is decoupled. Now, depending on my goals, this would be over-engineering. But because I know what my goals are moving forward, that I want to have different sound effects and I want to have different logic for them, this isn't over-engineering, because as soon as I extend this, or I say, oh, I want 100 different button types, and I want Steam Workshop support where other people can have their own button types, suddenly this doesn't look like over-engineering anymore. This looks like planning. And so the question, again, is what is the problem I'm trying to solve? The problem that I'm trying to solve is not just having sounds play on pressing and releasing the button. If that was the problem I was trying to solve, this would be over-engineering. The problem I'm trying to solve, or problems I'm trying to solve, perhaps, are I want to make sure that I can add more sound effects that have different logic on different types of buttons. So I want the logic to be different. Here's an example of it being different. It's not just press and release. On this case, on pressing, it is continuing a looping sound, and then on releasing, it is stopping the sound. So a sound plays while the button's pressed, but when you release, it stops. And I have different logic that I want as well, where it might be that a volume gets louder the longer that you're holding the button, or things like that. And so I'm looking at this, and even though this would be horrendously over-engineered if all I wanted to do was press and release a button and just play that sound, because of my goals, it's not over-engineered. And so that's what's really important. What's the problem you're actually trying to solve? And I want to be able to have like potentially hundreds of these, plus workshop support, so that players can create their own setups. For my problem, this isn't over-engineering. For your problem, this might be stupid. This might be a stupid level of detail, depending on the problem you're trying to solve. If you have one button sound that plays for every button throughout your entire game, yeah, don't do this. But this is the problem I'm trying to solve. And another thing that I think is really interesting is this actually a problem? In my case, yes, because if I'm trying to have all these different sets of logic, what am I going to do? Create 100 different classes that inherit from button? I could do that. That's kind of gross though. In this case, I can just have JSON. That's more user-friendly. I can have tooling that is outside of the game. I don't have to recompile it. That's a big thing as well, is that if I can avoid, I know it's JavaScript, but shh. If I can avoid having to rebuild some of the same things, it ends up just working a lot nicer. And it also means if all that people can import is JSON files, that probably makes it a lot safer, because I don't want people to be accessing Node file system or something crazy like that with a JavaScript file. So this helps solve some of those problems. But let me talk about what's not a problem, or not a problem right now. It might become a problem later. A problem that I don't have right now is that these files are too difficult to work in. I could look at this and go, I need tooling for these JSON files. The reality is I don't. Why not? Well, for one thing, I'm the only one working in it right now. It's really easy for me to copy paste this and to make a new template, and that's great. But I don't need to make tooling for this. I've seen JSON files that you do need tooling for. This isn't a case where you really need that. If I'm looking at this and I'm like, well, what's the problem in terms of, well, I shouldn't be using JSON because it's too bloated. Okay, that could be fair, but is that a problem that I need to solve right now? Is that actually a problem? Not at this point. Now, it could be very fair to compile this down to another type. Compile probably isn't the right term, but to make this into binary or some other form of data, that's totally fair. But in my context, or just to minify it, like heck, that's also something. But for my goal right now, that's not a problem. And so where I would start to go into over-engineering for my use case is if I started to make tooling for this. Now down the road, I might want to make tooling for it for the sake of players or modders. But if I make this simple enough to use, I also don't mind just handing people the reins for JSON, because you'll probably be able to get more done in it anyway. And my suspicion is that it would be easier to work in the JSON than in an external tool, and sometimes that's just the case. I could be wrong on that. That's probably a programmer talking. Some people are probably cringing at that. Okay, I'm sorry. I'm sorry. So when you look at am I over-engineering, you really have to look at what is the problem you're trying to solve, and is this actually a problem? And then importance. Is this the most important problem I can solve right now? I really like this question because it really reframes what you're doing, because it might be that this is an important problem. And I think this actually goes into, hey, the problem of, do I need tooling for players to be able to update that? Well, is that an important problem? It might be. I'm not sure yet. So I don't even know if it's an important problem, but also it's certainly not the most important problem I can solve right now. There are other problems in the game that need to be addressed, and making tooling isn't one of them. So that's where I'd be going into over-engineering for my specific time in the project. That could change. What's important changes over time, right? Your boss comes in and they're like, hey, we've got this bug report and this is really key. Importance changes. But asking, is this the most important problem I can solve right now, helps you avoid over-engineering for a problem. And then there's effectiveness. Is this the most effective? I think that these step a little bit away from over-engineering, but is this the most effective solution to the problem? I've seen some systems that are very convoluted and they try to solve problems, but they do it in a way that's not really, I question what the problem is that they're trying to solve, and they just get very hard to wield. I think that one case that I'd actually look at is, I'm going to pick on node packages, and of course I'm going to pick on left pad because everybody loves the left pad story. Is the most effective solution to wanting to left pad a string downloading a module and importing it? I would argue no. Some people might argue yes. I would argue that's really not. Just include a function in your project that solves your specific use case and move on with your life. If you're doing it a lot, you can just include it in your own project. Is this the most effective solution to the problem? And this actually goes back into, hey, do I actually need tooling for the users? If I made tooling, would that actually be better than just working in straight JSON files? Like, what actually is the most effective solution to the problem? And the reason why this question is useful to ask is that sometimes the most effective solution to the problem is a simpler one. You know, GLaDOS has a great quote of something like, the right solution to a problem is often the simplest one. It's something like that. I'm sure I butchered it, but yay GLaDOS. So sometimes when you are trying to solve a problem, you can get into this world of, I have to do it this way. And that's not necessarily true. And that's where I kind of go back to the most effective solution to the problem. You have to, again, know what your problem is that you're trying to solve, because how do you know if it's the most effective solution to a problem if you don't know what the problem is, right? That's really important. And then you can actually start to analyze, is this an effective solution? Would making a GUI be an effective solution to this problem? For me, no. I would rather work in JSON for this level of problem. This is relatively simple. Like for somebody else, they're like, what the heck was this? And I think that's totally valid. This is actually an area where it probably would be better to have some sort of tooling. But this is a legitimate question. This is a legitimate setup where it's like, okay, well, is this the most effective solution to the problem? With what my problem is right now, which is me creating potentially 100 plus of these rapidly on a short schedule as a single solo dev, yes, this solves my problem effectively. This is, as far as I'm aware, the most effective solution to my problem. This isn't, don't get too hung up on the terminology most effective. You could say to the problem I can think of in a reasonable time frame. You can add stuff like that if you want to, but the goal is just to figure out, hey, is this a good solution? And maybe I'm over-engineering it. And so it helps you then look at the problem in the space of other solutions and avoid over-engineering. And solution. Now, some people will go, this shouldn't be the last one, but I like it being the last one. Does this actually solve the problem? Ideally, if you've gotten through this step, then the answer is yes. But this helps you revisit if you need to go back to this step. And it also then helps you revisit this step, and it also helps you revisit, is this actually a problem? If you realize that you have a solution to the problem that doesn't actually solve the problem, you need to reanalyze what you're doing. If you have a solution to the problem that, and you realize like, you know what, like I can't actually solve the problem, or maybe you get to this point and you think that you know what the problem is, and you think that you have a solution, and then you're like, I don't. Then it might be time to step back, get other people involved, or to just reanalyze, is this actually worth doing? Is this actually going to help me out? Because if you create a system that doesn't solve the problems that you have, you're wasting your time. And that might sound really harsh, but it's just, if you're solving problems you don't have, you're wasting your time. If you're solving problems that you'll have soon and you're preparing it, or you're putting in the pipes for it, things like that, like you're preparing for it, that's valid, as long as you know that those are real problems. If you don't know if those problems are real, then that becomes a question mark, and it might be better to not even bother with that yet. But that's the basic concept of pies. What is the problem I'm trying to solve? Make sure that you're actually solving a problem. Is this actually a problem? Importance. Is this the most important problem I can solve right now? Effectiveness. Is this the most effective solution to the problem? And solution. Does this actually solve the problem? Those are some things that I like to look at when I have the question, am I over-engineering? There can be this idea of pre-optimization is the root of all evil. And I think that is really unhelpful, because you have to define what you're optimizing. Because if what you're optimizing is the solution to your current problem, because you're not solving your problem well right now, because it's going to bite you in the butt in a week after you finish this sprint, then it's not over-engineering. I understand there are deadlines. I understand there are timelines. I understand that you don't always have the ideal solution. One of my recommendations, if you know that it would be best for you to spend more time, but you can't, if you know it's going to bite you in the butt, because sometimes you're in that situation, you know that you have to implement a bad solution, you know it's going to bite you later, but you have to hit the deadline. That happens. My recommendation for those cases is that you at least add in some comments. So for example, let's say that you have a part of your project where you're just like, I have this terrible setup where I have to like, let's say manually define all modules. Let's say that we do something like that. and are like, ugh, this is gross, I shouldn't have to do this, you can add a to-do item. Did this to hit a deadline, but ideally we dynamically load this, or maybe we generate a list before building and we use that. You just, at least you add in a note about, hey, this isn't on target. And this does a few different things. For one thing, this kind of protects you as a dev. This might sound kind of awful, but if you're writing code that you know is bad, then it kind of helps protect you so that people look at this terrible code and they know, oh, here's what was going on. I kind of like having that in some cases as a little bit of insurance and protection. Not that I'm like, people are allowed to point out bad code and stuff like that. That's fine. But I don't want to have a long conversation with someone about why this is a bad practice or why this was a bad solution if I know that it was. And that also saves them time because they might think I need to have a conversation with so-and-so. This is important. Like they're putting something really bad in the code base. If they see this kind of comment, then they might bring it up and say, hey, we need to fix this now. But they know that there's not a conversation that needs to happen. Like you're not going to have a senior dev come up and be like, we need to talk about this code that you wrote. It's really bad. It's, yeah, I know that it was bad. Okay, now we can put aside some time to solve it. That's just, I think that that's worth noting. Another thing that this does is that it helps you remember if you go back to it, or other people know if they go to it, I can safely replace this, because sometimes people will get worried about, hey, is this really key for the code? Is a lot of stuff hanging on this? Is there a reason it was done this way that just the project breaks? Like if you find something where it's like, you have a comment and this comment fixes the code, it's really worth noting, note, the below comment is necessary for the project to run. Like if you have a bad solution that you needed to implement for whatever reason, you can note that, but just make sure that the big thing is making sure that people know so that you're not wasting people's time down the road and somebody can just go, oh, yeah, I thought that there was a better solution to this. Let me just remove this and rewrite it now that we have the time, and it ends up being a lot safer and more stable. So I hope that this helps someone out. Let me know if this helped you out with looking at am I over-engineering. Again, I'll just put this up here. I find that this is useful for me looking at my current problems. People might have different acronyms that they want to use, or I know that people might look at a different order. They might want to do this first. But this is something that has personally helped me out with assessing my code, assessing my project, assessing what I'm currently doing. And I also want to note that I do tutoring, and I also have a Fiverr where I can create browser tooling for you that does cool things like letting you click and drag around on a screen where you can interact with your own stream and have all these different browser sources, so you don't have to end up trying to get rid of all of your old stream stuff. You can actually just integrate your old tooling, whatever alerts you have, in with new tooling, and it works out beautifully. And I also do tutoring on Wyzant or on Fiverr, and I also stream sometimes. So I hope that those resources could be helpful for you, and also just that this resource was helpful for you. Hope you have a fantastic rest of your day. Go out and happy coding. And if you're interested in this in another context, have any questions, etc., feel free to let me know in the comments. Take care. Where's that stop recording button? There you are.